tigers are probably one of the most easily identifiable cat species. You know, a big orange cat with black stripes. I'm sure any 3-year-old would easily be able to describe a... No, I've met 3-year-olds, some of them aren't that smart. But tigers are still fairly distinct in their appearance. Except on very rare occasions, some tigers might have unique colorations and patterns. And while these color morphs are quite rare among wild tigers, they are a lot more common in captivity due to captive breeding and does highlight the controversial relationship between humans and tigers. So let's learn about these 6 unique color patterns that a tiger might have. Before we talk about the rare and unique color patterns of tigers, we should talk about the regular patterns of tigers. The orange with black stripes, the default skin if you will. So why do tigers have their stripes? Well, the prevailing hypothesis is that stripes serve as camouflage. See, tigers live and hunt in savannas and forests, where they're hunting in tall grasses and dense vegetation. So it's thought that stripes act as disruptive coloration, breaking up the tiger silhouette in this dense vegetation and dappled light that they hunt in, making it harder for them to be detected by prey. Other cat species also adopt this technique. The blotches, rosés, and spots that other cat species have also serve as disruptive coloration, making them harder to see in more densely foliated environments. Now, the reason why tigers have stripes and not spots isn't exactly clear. Arguments can be made that stripes serve as better camouflage in tall grasses and maybe the striped shadows that trees sometimes cast down. However, other spotted cats do co-occur with tigers, like leopards, and they're just as successful, so I think it's just a case of 2 different solutions to the same problem. So that's the stripes explained, but why are tigers orange? Orange might blend in well with winter foliage in more arid and temperate environments that tigers occupy. However, in more green foliage that you get in summer or just year-round in more tropical environments, orange does seem to stand out quite a bit. And that might be true for you and I. However, the large herbivores that tigers prey upon don't actually have photoreceptors in their eyes to detect red light, so they can't actually see red or orange. And so in these dense green environments, tigers don't actually stand out, meaning that their camouflage is still intact and they can remain stealthy predators. Hell, even to animals that can see red, like you and I and other primates, tigers are still very tricky to see in these densely foliated environments. So that's the normal colors of tigers explained, and they have worked well for tigers in a variety of different environments. So now the question is, why do some tigers deviate from these colors? Well, all the unique color patterns I'm going to talk about today are a result of genetic mutations, causing tigers to display different patterns and colorations, and in some cases might even decrease their survivability. Like our white tigers, the most popular color morph of tigers probably don't do that well in the wild. White tigers are leucistic, a condition that causes an animal to lose part of its pigmentation, giving white tigers their white fur and blue eyes. It's kind of a less extreme version of albinism when an animal loses all of its pigmentation or melanin. Leucism is also what gives us white lions. So neither white lions or white tigers are albinos as commonly misconceived, nor are they a rare and unique subspecies. They just have a rare condition that causes them to have less pigmentation. And while white lions do naturally occur in some prides in southern Africa, there are no wild white tigers left in the world. There have been scattered observations of white tigers throughout history, but the last confirmed wild white tiger was shot in the mid-20th century. The reason why white tigers are so rare in the wild is due to the condition being linked to a recessive gene. See, for a recessive gene to become expressed, it needs copies of that recessive gene from both parents. If any one of those copies is the normal gene, then the tiger will show up as orange. So with this gene already being rare as it is, a tiger getting 2 copies of this recessive gene in the wild is already extremely unlikely. Additionally, the white fur of white tigers kind of ruins their camouflage in most of the environments that tigers occupy, making it harder for them to hunt and survive, decreasing the amount of white tigers we have in the wild. And so nowadays we only find white tigers in captivity in fairly high numbers due to captive breeding of these rare tiger morphs. However, the breeding of white tigers is often linked to inbreeding, and white tigers have a lot of genetic defects. More on that later. One alternate tiger color morph you can still find in the wild though is the golden or strawberry tiger. Just like white tigers, these aren't a separate species or subspecies, they're just a different color morph. And also like white tigers, their condition is caused by a recessive gene, in this case the pale stripe or wideband gene. The wideband gene impacts the expression of black during hair growth, causing these golden tigers to have paler coats and more thinner brown stripes, almost appearing stripeless in some cases. Golden tigers are also bred in captivity, though not in the same high numbers as white tigers are. I have seen some sites say that there's only 30 to 50 left, however, there's no actual sources behind these, and given how unregulated tiger breeding is, more on that later, I highly doubt there are so few left in the world. Which isn't necessarily a good thing, because just like with white tigers, golden tigers tend to be inbred and suffer many health conditions because of it. In the wild, however, these tigers are extremely rare, but are still occasionally sighted, specifically in and around Kaziranga National Park in Assam, India. Golden tigers have been sighted here since 2014, and in 2020 park authorities tweeted out that there are 4 adult golden tigers in the park, with new golden tiger cubs being seen since. The sudden increase in golden tigers in the park has initially been met with concerns of inbreeding within the park's tiger population. As I mentioned earlier, the golden tiger condition is caused by a recessive gene, and for this recessive gene to become more common within a population, both parents would need this gene, which is more likely to happen when both parents are related, as we've seen in breeding with captive white and golden tigers. These inbreeding concerns were amplified by the more rapid development around the area, cutting off wildlife corridors that tigers might use, essentially isolating Kaziranga's tiger population. However, some scientists propose that the increase of golden tigers in Kaziranga is a result of genetic drift. Now, genetic drift is a condition where some genes become more common in a population purely by random chance. It's not like natural selection where some genes have a clear advantage over the other. With genetic drift, there's no apparent advantage with one gene over the other, kind of like how golden tigers seem to have the same survivability of normal tigers. But both genetic drift and natural selection is important in evolution. Genetic drift does have the same concerns about isolation within Kaziranga's tiger population, as genetic drift is more likely to occur in smaller, more isolated populations, where these rarer genes may become more common. But who knows, maybe the rise of golden tigers in Kaziranga may even attract more tourists to the park. Although good luck seeing even a normal tiger. I may or may not be salty about flying all that way and the only cat I saw was this one. And I can already see that kind of cat at home. But I do still highly recommend Kaziranga as a travel destination, even if you don't see the tigers. In fact, my co-creator for this channel, Abdul, does have a travel vlog channel where he will, or if not already has, covered our journey to Kaziranga, so be sure to go check that out. Now, you may be wondering what would happen if I take a white tiger and cross it with a golden tiger. Well, this has actually been done. When a tiger has the recessive genes that give us white and golden tigers, it creates what's known as a snow-white tiger. First glance, you might think that this is an albino tiger. However, just like with white tigers, it still has leucism, giving it its white fur. It's the addition of the wideband gene that gives us golden tigers that makes these tigers appear stripeless, giving us almost entirely white tiger with these very thin pale stripes, if any stripes at all. Due to this condition being caused by not one but 2 sets of recessive genes, it is extremely unlikely to show up in the wild. But not impossible. There have been a few cases in the 1800s and early 1900s of white tigers with almost no or very faint stripes. Most of these cats seem to be snow-white tigers. However, there is also one instance of 2 tiger cubs being found with pink eyes, indicating that they weren't actually snow-white tigers but may have been true albino tigers. And funnily enough, most of these stories originate from Assam, the same state where golden tigers are appearing today. So it does seem that there was a period in history where snow-white tigers and maybe even albinos used to roam in what is today India and Bangladesh. However, just like white tigers, snow-white tigers have long disappeared from the wild. And with most of the stories of snow-white tigers being hunting stories, probably not helping their survival. But you can still find snow-white tigers today in captivity. The first snow-white tigers in America originated from the breeding of 2 white tigers, which either both had the recessive wideband gene or resulted due to spontaneous mutation, giving us the first captive snow-white tigers. Later, these snow-white tigers were bred with regular orange tigers, giving us the first captive golden tigers, which all golden tigers in captivity today originate from. Unfortunately, the breeding practices around white, golden, and snow-white tigers is often very exploitative and usually involves a lot of inbreeding. The unique coloration of these rare tiger morphs makes them popular attractions at places like roadside zoos and in the private animal trade. But breeding these cats may not always be ethical. Artificial selection of these rare color morphs often involve a lot of inbreeding. And the reason is due to these conditions caused by recessive genes, as I've mentioned before. And so to breed more tigers that have these recessive genes, you want to breed the tigers that you already know have the genes, which tends to be tigers that are already closely related to each other, given how rare these traits already are. All white tigers in the US, for instance, are believed to have originated from a single white male Bengal tiger that was forced to breed with his daughter in order to give us more white tigers. And this inbreeding persists today. The repeated inbreeding in white tigers, and just sometimes tigers in general today, has resulted in many genetic defects, such as increased infant mortality, facial deformities, heart issues, and immune system deficiencies, to mention a few. The white tigers I mentioned earlier that were bred to give us the first snow white tigers were siblings, meaning that all snow white tigers and, by extension, golden tigers in captivity all arose due to inbreeding. Outcrossing has been used to expand the white tiger gene pool, which involves breeding white tigers with unrelated orange tigers to increase genetic diversity and mitigate the impacts of inbreeding. However, inbreeding still persists in many facilities today that don't properly manage the tigers' genealogies. And these white, golden, and snow white tigers aren't exactly valuable in conservation either, as these traits occur extremely rarely in the wild and aren't inherently beneficial to the species. As I mentioned earlier, the white fur of white and snow white tigers may even be detrimental to the survival of an individual. White tigers also tend to be more susceptible to strabismus or crossed eyes, impacting their vision. Since 2011, the AZA, the Association of Zoos and Aquarium, has actually banned its members from breeding white tigers, along with other rare cat morphs like king cheetahs and white lions, to mitigate inbreeding and the defects that come with it. The problem with golden and white tigers underlines a much bigger issue with tigers and other big cats in captivity. As of recording this, IUCN estimates there to be 2,600 to 3,900 tigers in the wild. Meanwhile, there are thousands more tigers in captivity today. Most of these tigers are bred to generate profit, to attract guests to roadside zoos, or to be sold on the private animal market. Like, there's a surprising amount of people that privately own tigers. In some countries like South Africa, for example, it's relatively easy for a more affluent person to get their hands on their own private tiger. Hell, there's even a Netflix show we were all obsessed with in 2020, showing just how exploitative the big cat industry is. A lot of captive tigers and lions are essentially farmed, being raised to adulthood just to be harvested for their parts for traditional medicine or to be shot in canned hunting, a process where big cats are released into a confined space where they can't really hide or run away, and they're just shot. It's called hunting, but really it's more akin to shooting a tiger in a barrel. And these practices are often also tied into cub petting, where cubs are taken away from their mothers to interact with guests, but in doing so these cubs have poor development, and places that do so often put down their big cats because they're too costly to maintain, and it's all about profits. In the US, action has actually been done to end the private ownership of big cats, with the Big Cat Public Safety Act enacted in December 2022. The law bans the private ownership of big cats, except for people that already own them, but even then, they aren't allowed to breed or trade them. This law also prohibits contact with cats, like cub or even adult cat petting. Now, only licensed facilities that meet welfare standards, like accredited zoos or sanctuaries, can keep big cats. So hopefully this leads to better care for captive cats in the US at least. There is also another problem with royal or Bengal tigers kept in the West, in that most of them aren't actually true Bengal tigers. A lot of facilities might cite their tigers as Bengal tigers, a population or subspecies, depending what taxonomy you use, from the Indian subcontinent. However, studies have found that Bengal tigers outside of India generally have a mix of different tiger populations across Asia. All white tigers in America, and by extension snow white and golden tigers, are mixed between Siberian and Bengal tigers. Mixing genetics between geographically distinct populations is often frowned upon in conservation, as mixed individuals may have lost adaptations unique to specific populations. These Bengal tigers, all being mixed, may limit their viability for reintroductions into the future and make them less valuable for conservation. Now, I'm not saying that all captivity is bad. While there are definitely places that mismanage and abuse big cats, there are still prestigious zoos and facilities that help the actual conservation of these big cats. Several global zoo associations have well-monitored breeding programs for Siberian and Sumatran tigers that make sure these threatened animals maintain their genetic diversity. Many places in India also maintain genetically viable captive Bengal tiger populations. These captive breeding programs help to preserve these tigers outside of their wild populations and may even help contribute to reintroductions further down the line. In fact, South China tigers, which are considered extinct in the wild, are actually in the process of being rewilded, funny enough in South Africa. Lauhu Valley Reserve, a private game reserve in Free State, South Africa, was actually created to allow formerly captive South China tigers to learn survival skills in a wild environment. And while these tigers in South Africa are very far from home, it does give us insight as to how we might reintroduce these tigers back into China in the future. Kazakhstan does seem to be the next country to restore their wild tiger population though. While the Caspian tigers that once roamed the country are long extinct, 2 captive Siberian tigers have been introduced into a large enclosure at, and I'm probably going to mispronounce this, Ili Balkash Nature Reserve, where their offspring will be the first wild tigers reintroduced back into the nation. The 2 Siberian tigers, by the way, also originated from a zoo in the Netherlands. Also, some facilities act as rescues, taking in cats from the private trade, providing a better home for these animals. So even if a place does have white tigers, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're exploiting and breeding them. There are still people trying their best to conserve these felines. We must just be careful on which facilities that we choose to support. Also, sorry, not sorry for the whole rant on captive tigers and just captive big cats in general. I just think it's very important to talk about these topics, especially when talking about these rare tiger color morphs, which I'm sure you've seen now. We have a very checkered history with captivity and humans. But there are also 2 other tiger color morphs that aren't as abundant in captivity that I haven't talked about yet, so let's get back into it. We've seen examples of what happens when a tiger loses its pigmentation, but what about the opposite when a tiger has excess pigmentation? Well, typically the condition when an animal has an abundance of pigmentation is known as melanism. It's the same condition that gives us black leopards and black jaguars, collectively known as black panthers. However, true melanism has not been observed in tigers, but we have seen tigers displaying pseudomelanism, also known as abundism. Pseudomelanistic tigers, sometimes called black tigers, are also a result of recessive gene, causing their stripes to become wider and sometimes merged. But this isn't a case of true melanism, as they still have their iconic orange fur, just bigger stripes. Pseudomelanism has also been documented in other cat species like cheetahs, giving us king cheetahs, domestic cats, as well as leopards and jaguars, giving these weird blotchy spots. Leopards and jaguars actually have a lot of very unique color patterns. Maybe I should make a video on them after this one, you know? And if you want to see that, maybe leave a like and a comment and subscribe. Currently, India is the only place in the world you can see pseudomelanistic tigers, wild or captive. I could only find 3 zoos with a handful of pseudomelanistic tigers, all born within captivity. So they haven't been extensively bred in captivity, at least not yet anyways. Pseudomelanistic tigers are just as rare in the wild, only being found in Samilipal National Park in Odisha, India. In 2014, over a dozen of the estimated 24 adult tigers in the park were thought to be pseudomelanistic. Just like with the golden tigers of Kaziranga, it's been proposed that inbreeding and genetic drift being the result of the high numbers of pseudomelanistic tigers within this park, both of which are likely due to the high degree of relatedness in Samilipal's tiger population, as well as the tiger population being very small and isolated. To alleviate the concerns of inbreeding, 2 female tigers have since been introduced into the park to help increase the genetic diversity and mitigate the impacts of inbreeding. These black tigers do go to show how important it is to monitor genetics in conservation, especially with the amount of habitat fragmentation we have nowadays restricting gene flow between populations. So now that we have black tigers and we have white tigers, what happens if we... Well, this has also been done, and no, it doesn't give us a grey tiger. It gives what's called a pseudomelanistic white tiger. A white tiger with much thicker merged black stripes. As far as I'm aware, there are only 2 zoos with recorded pseudomelanistic white tigers. In both of these cases, the parents would have had the recessive gene that causes pseudomelanism, as well as the recessive genes for leucism, which they passed to some of their cubs, giving us the first pseudomelanistic white tiger. Since leucism and pseudomelanism are caused by separate genes, it was possible for a tiger to display both of these traits, kind of like how snow white tigers display traits of both golden and white tigers. Theoretically, it may be possible for a tiger to be pseudomelanistic and golden, and it may even be possible for a tiger to display all 3 recessive traits. Which does beg the question what these cats might look like. But this is probably a question best left unanswered. We've seen the consequences of what happens when humans exploit these cats for their rare color morphs. So while we as humans like these rare and unusual things, is it right for us to become so obsessed over them, or should these rare color morphs stay rare and obscure?